Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today, we're going to be looking at the question, were the Crusades justified?
That's right. We're lucky enough to be joined by J. Stephen Roberts from the popular YouTube channel Real Crusades History and Austin Kelly from the brand new show Knights of the Cross. And we're going to talk about how the Crusades were actually a super important event in human history and why they were self-defense and why you should thank God for the Crusaders.
All right, welcome, guys, to the show. I'm excited to have you guys. Great topic. Looking forward to diving into it with you guys.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
Yes. So Stephen and Austin, they both got some really great and super exciting projects going on about the Crusades. One is a YouTube channel that I watch all the time. I'm a massive fan of ingesting information about the Crusades. And then Austin's got a great new series coming out on the Christian channel called Knights of the Cross. And, you know, this is a great opportunity to talk about who the Crusaders really were. What were the Crusades? Because if you look at it from, I don't know, kind of modern historical or the slanted view that modern historians will put on it, it's a war of aggression. It's a war of religion. It's a war of, I don't know, second sons who didn't have any inheritance in Europe going over and trying to claim land in the Holy Land and killing a bunch of poor, innocent, sweet Muslims along the way. And the reality of that is, number one, that's all wrong. Number two, there's so much more nuance, just like there is in any historical situations. And like I said in the intro, we really should thank God for the Crusaders because our way of life and Western society and culture would not exist in the way it does today without these incredibly brave and devout men. So I'd love to do their memory and their sacrifices some justices here. So, Stephen, I'll ask you this first. You know, I'll ask it this blunt. Were the Crusades justified or were they a war of aggression?
They were totally justified. Yeah. I think if you just look at the context of what was going on at the time, there's a lot of different ways we could approach this, but the Crusades kind of start at the end of the 11th century in the Western European world, which kind of is the Catholic world at that time, and Islam had just been through several centuries of a lot of military success, a lot of expansion, a lot of that at the expense of the Christian world. We think about the Muslim conquest of Spain, the Muslim conquest of Sicily. And this is actually kind of a good thing to look at because at the time that the Crusades got going, Italy had only recently been freed from a state of kind of constant piracy by, Muslim North African pirates, basically, because Sicily had been held by the Muslims for a couple of centuries. And while that was the case, Muslim mariners from Sicily were able to kind of raid up and down the coast of Italy. And so we have accounts, from some of the different chroniclers at the time talking about, thousands of Christian slaves being loaded onto boats and taken off to be sold in the slave markets. That's just kind of one example of, what we're talking about here. But the Normans reconquered Sicily for Christendom over the course of about 3 decades in the late 11th century. And that in itself kind of set the stage for the Crusades because the Christians were then able to kind of have more secure sea lanes. We're able to kind of use the Mediterranean was no longer just an Islamic lake as it kind of had been for several centuries. So some level of safe sea travel was possible at that point. And, a lot of the guys involved in the First Crusade were Southern Normans or, came from that group of Normans from Sicily and the south of Italy. And a lot of the Italian mariners who were involved in the First Crusade within living memory, remember the point when Italy, the coast of Italy itself was largely unsafe because of the dominance of Islamic sea power up until that point. Anyway, it's easy for me to go off on tangents, but the point is you've really got several centuries of almost overwhelming Muslim power, in the Mediterranean world and into what had been the Christian world. And really, Christendom was kind of pushed back into this northwestern corner of Europe.
Hmm.
And the Crusades were to kind of put it simply, were a pushback against that. And suddenly, whereas Christendom had been on the defensive for many centuries, now they were kind of taking the fight to the Muslims. So, and it is meaningful too to talk about sort of a Muslim world and a Christian world. One of the criticisms you'll hear sometimes when people are getting upset about the Crusades is they'll say, well, it's too simple to say it was just Christendom versus Islam, because there's a lot of different Christian kingdoms, a lot of different Muslim kingdoms. There was infighting amongst those various kingdoms as well. But there are a couple of historians who've put this really succinctly, like Bernard Riley at the beginning of this big book he wrote about the Reconquista in Spain, talked about how at this period of time, even all those things considered, there was this overarching identity of being either a Christian, a Muslim, or Jewish. And within that context, that just meant everything for the way people thought at this time. So, and the Muslims themselves kind of understood this, that this was kind of a new thing, that there's a famous chronicler, Ibn al-Athir, who actually talks about, wow, all of a sudden, the Franks, that is the Latin Christians, are fighting back. And this is kind of how he perceived it.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah,
made their?
go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, what made their military so strong? Because from what I know, they did have a lot of push in a lot of areas that stretched thousands of miles, even up into Portugal, Spain, along the whole Mediterranean. What were some of the things that made them stronger? Was it just their marine development? What was it? Weaponry? Was it just the fact that they were doing it, for God, and that sort of hypersensitivity? They thought, they're doing this for Muhammad or jihad.
Well, Rand, I'd like to answer that and see if Stephen agrees with me, but it's not necessarily that they were so strong. The rise of Islam came about a time of great weakness in the Greek Roman East. The Romans, the Byzantines, and the Parthians had been fighting wars for centuries, and they were like, two boxers in the 15th round who were on their last legs, right? So it was an incredible moment of weakness that then Islam was able to then come in as a relatively minor power from the Arabian Peninsula and then start taking over really important areas of the Byzantine Empire. Particularly, they go up, they take Palestine, then they're able to take Egypt. And Egypt was the breadbasket of the ancient world. It would be like if you took away all food production in the modern United States, then there's big problems. So once those dominoes started to fall, you had the disorganized Latin West, after the fall of Rome, and then you had a really weak Byzantine Empire. There was really not much to stop them. It's like, I don't know, like I said, two boxers in the 15th round, and then someone comes in fresh, they're going to knock that guy out. Stephen, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Right before the rise of Islam, you have, like exactly what you're saying, there was this big war between the last Persian Empire, basically, and the Byzantines. And you can think of these two as kind of the great world powers of the period. And this warfare was very destructive to both of them, and really left them in a position where they did have a lot of trouble resisting the Arabs. And, crucially, probably the most important thing about, what the Muslims were able to do early on is they subdued the entirety of the Persian Empire. And a lot of what we kind of think of as early Muslim civilization kind of comes directly from this. We think about it as Arab, but really it was coming out of this Persian world that they had subdued, and a lot of the military ideas and that kind of thing came out of Persia. The Arabs too weren't just kind of like extremely primitive people. A lot of them had experience working as mercenaries for the Byzantines, for the Persians. So yeah, a lot of it I think was this kind of ripeness of the opportunity, and Byzantium was really in a weakened state at that point too. And yeah, what they were able to conquer, they were really able to conquer the most, the wealthiest and the most sophisticated parts of the Christian world at that time. And yeah, I mean, they pushed all the way into Spain. And it's kind of interesting when we think about what stopped them, because everybody always, the big event that really stopped the early Muslim expansion was Charles Martel and the Franks. And I think that what the Franks sort of brought to the table, and what the potential that existed, even in this kind of embryonic state within Latin Christendom, the Franks were kind of a foreshadowing of that. And, there's something to be said for, there's like a type of sophisticated decadence that can almost be a kind of weakness, and maybe kind of a more rural backwoodsness that can sometimes be a strength in to a certain degree. The Latin West at this time they were kind of the country bumpkins. They weren't like the advanced city dwelling Byzantines, but in the long run, that was going to serve them well, because the country boys were going to be able to fight ultimately.
I love reading medieval accounts of the Franks, and whether it's Islamic sources or even Byzantine sources, they're like, these guys are big, they're loud, they eat way too much beef, and they like to fight. And I mean, that was the assessment.
That's about all they had at that point. Yeah.
And it really was. Now, and the first thing that we talked about, Steve, you brought up something I think that's really important, is that Islam had taken over Christian lands. These were lands that had been Christian for centuries, really since the inception of Christianity. We're like, I mean, you think of Christian countries now, you think of, Spain or Portugal or Italy. Egypt was every bit as Catholic. I mean, our great saints like Athanasius and Augustine, they're coming from these areas. This was like one of the 5, primate sees of Christendom,
Right.
Alexandria. I mean, this was the heart of Christianity. Or the Holy Land, or large areas of Syria. I mean, we had great Syrian saints, and these areas that now you think of as, well, these are the Islamic homelands. They were not. Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Asia Minor, Tunisia, Morocco, Portugal, Spain, huge parts of Italy, really important islands in the Mediterranean. These were all Christian lands that had been taken over, violently subjugated, forced conversions, or if a Christian didn't convert, they were allowed to exist if they paid the jizya tax, which basically says you're going to be a third-class citizen, you're going to pay tax just for being Christian. On top of that, you have pilgrims being completely assaulted, access to holy sites being denied. And then you have, after the Battle of Manzikert, the Eastern Empire is in real serious trouble. And that's when the emperor, the Byzantine emperor, writes to the Pope and says, I know we haven't really been seeing eye to eye lately. That being said, we're getting our asses kicked pretty bad here. You want to help us out, right? And that's when the story of the Crusades really kicks off, is that after centuries of Christians being killed, slaughtered, subjugated, holy sites being taken over and destroyed, all of this, finally the Christians fight back. And that's where we get into what I think is a very heroic response by the Latin West. And Austin, this kind of gets into the series that you're making, that there is a real heroic nature to the choice that these men made. Modern movies, like there was Kingdom of God. They made everyone seem like just this absolute hypocritical, money hungry, who just wanted to kill people. But that's not the reality. And I think in your series, Knights of the Cross, you do a great job of showing the heroic nature of these men who made this incredible sacrifice. Can you talk a little bit about their character and how that inspired what you're doing?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up. And I just want to say that this show has, been 5 years in the making. It's something Hollywood will not support. And, that's why we crowdfunded the show. And it's currently crowdfunding right now at christianchannel.com. click on crowdfund. But yeah, the reason why is because why we created the show and why we reached out to J. Stephen Roberts is because we wanted to tell the truth about the Crusades and exactly what you guys were speaking about earlier. Hollywood has a horrible reputation of slandering Christians on media, not just the saints. So what we did with this series was an action-packed drama about the Crusade, specifically the Third Crusade, about Richard the Lionheart. And so the heroism and of this character really was because of Jay Stephen. He really wanted to talk about, the virtues of this king of England. And so we ended up filming episode 1. And, it blended a lot of the despair of the truth of the crusade. He was undermanned, underarmed, yet he still went to battle. And so it's a very cinematic series. It's a 2-part mini series, and it tells the truth about the crusade. So to answer your question, it's the reason why we made the show is to tell the truth. And Hollywood doesn't have a reputation for telling truthful stories about Christians. So hopefully after, this airs, a lot of people could watch the show on thechristianchannel.com.
It's amazing how society or historians or popular media can take something so heroic, so fundamental to the way and the rights and the life and the freedoms that we have and turn them into villains. That's just astounding to me. And that's because of who owns the media, who makes it, who will allow what story to be told to certain people. But when you start doing your own real research, outside of the lens of bias, you can look at these men like, the big tropes about Crusaders: vicious, murderous, and they're just looking to claim land, and they're using the excuse of holy war to go and get a fiefdom. Couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, these Crusaders were selling everything they had, going into debt, putting the cross onto them, and they didn't view this as a war. They viewed it as an armed pilgrimage, right? This was a pilgrimage, and there was real deep religious sentiment here. Number one, in protecting the historical and Aboriginal Christians of those lands, but also to get to the Holy Sepulchre, right? Now, Holy Sepulchre and these nights is incredibly important to me. I mean, in fact, I'm a member of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, and they tie all the way back to 1099 to Godfrey de Bouillon, who was one of the Norman French knights who retook Jerusalem. But when you look at the way that the story is manipulated, the lies that's told about the Crusaders, it's really a shame that we can't look past that, and we can't look at what these men were really doing, because in a lot of ways, there's a lot of parallels that we're seeing in today's world, right? Just in the patterns that we're seeing around the world today. So I would ask you this, Stephen. So how can people start to reimagine and really, what are some, let's ask it this way. Give me 3 things that Christians or even people of curiosity should learn that will help them really understand the Crusaders maybe the first time in their life.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things I was thinking of while you're talking about that stuff is, first of all, mainstream historians, like what they, the research that they do and the findings they have about the Crusades are very much in contradiction to the pop culture, evil Crusaders thing. Like, that's the thing that's interesting. Like, for my channel, it's not like I have to find specialized Catholic historians or something. I use mainstream history. I use, all the stuff that's being done at places like Harvard, Yale, or whatever. I mean, these historians will, in fact, I think often get frustrated at how these tropes continue to exist. A good example, I don't know if we want to mention the name of the movie, but somebody mentioned a film earlier that was a huge blockbuster film that totally misrepresents the history of the Crusades. And they attempted to get several big name historians. Jonathan Phillips, I think, was one of them. And these guys were like, we can't sign off on this. This is all nonsense. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, you don't have to just go to a Catholic historian to get them to look at something like Kingdom of Heaven and say, this is all ridiculous.
What was Orlando Bloom's character? Who was he? I mean,
he was supposed to be Baileen of Ibelin.
Right. And just so incredibly ahistorical and completely manufactured. There's like, hey, that's a cool sounding name. Let's just put whatever character traits we want onto this guy, you know?
And that character
Um,
was a devout man. He wasn't like some kind of like brooding, skeptic like he wasn't in that movie.
yeah.
But another thing is like Richard the Lionheart, like Austin brought up the fact that we picked this particular king to talk about. And one of the reasons for that is that the stuff that people think about him is just not in line with the history. Some of the best source material we have about King Richard comes from the Muslims. And the truth is, this is somebody they admired, and they were afraid of him.
Yeah.
They were very afraid of him. But our big source for like, there's probably no other Christian king was written about more thoroughly by the Muslims than Richard the Lionheart. This was somebody who was very tough on the battlefield and, fought shoulder to shoulder with his men. I mean, and this is somebody who was, at the highest levels of his society. An equivalent would be if you would imagine the president of the United States putting on military gear and going out on the front lines. That's what it would have been the equivalent of.
I'm the greatest. No one's ever fought a crusade like me.
It's not going to happen.
My gauntlets are very big. I have huge gauntlets. You talking about
that's
Richard,
too right on the money.
You talk about Richard Lionheart. Number one, incredible man, such dynamism, and really the Third Crusade. I just read History of the Crusades by Thomas Asbridge. I'm sure I've heard of that one. It's an incredible book, and it's just like if Philip hadn't cheesed out and if Frederick hadn't drowned, that crusade would have absolutely have achieved all of its goals and more. And even still, the accounts of the outnumbered nature of the party led by Richard the Lionheart and his march down the sea, and then the way that he ultimately was able to negotiate the rights of Christians really flies in the face of he's just going there and swinging an axe and butchering everyone. I mean, this was a diplomat, a man of great faith, a man who was holding his people and his soldiers to standards of Christian conduct. So
he was able to talk with his enemies in a way that they related to him. I mean, there's a famous account from Ibn al-Athir of him asking to hear some Muslim music, and they bring in a Muslim musician who plays some music, and Richard comments on it and thinks, he says he likes it, and he was a musician too, so he was an extremely cultured individual, and he was not, he really was not viewed negatively by the Muslims. I mean, he just wasn't. They were afraid of him.
So where does the negativity around the Crusades come from? As far as I could tell, a lot of that starts during either the Enlightenment or in the Black Legend by the English against the Spanish after the Reformation. In your guys' estimation, Austin and Stephen, why do the Crusades and the Crusaders have such a bad memory now when during their time they were very heroic?
I think it goes in line with the movement in Western civilization that's kind of opposed to Western civilization. I mean, the same kind of mindset that's going to condemn the discovery of the Americas or sort of like dismiss the entire Western heritage as this evil, oppressive thing. That's where you get the idea that the Crusades are bad. And it's kind of interesting because often when you confront somebody who is kind of upset about the Crusades and you say, well, are you willing to condemn the entire history of Islam's expansion and conquests? Often they're not willing to go there. It's like, well, that's different. That's nuance. All of a sudden, all this nuance comes in, so it's not rooted in any kind of objective perspective. It's a kind of fanatical, kind of anti-Western, anti-Christian, anti-European Christendom, perspective, which is a powerful force in the Western world, unfortunately, for
suicidal empathy.
Still there today.
Yeah. Societies are more than welcome or more than happy to essentially let their society be subsided and to completely and radically change over the course of a generation or even two at the most the entire fabric of their society, lest they look unenlightened or unwelcoming or they look, brutish. It's all just about a mindset and the way they want to be perceived. But I can't imagine one of these poor Crusaders, living off of God knows what kind of food, traveling thousands of miles by feet, fighting incredible battles and sieges, all in the name of protecting Christians. And then if they could look at how they're perceived now, they'd be like, dude, what? How is that
Yeah.
even reality? You know, so I love that's why you're making, I love that this, that the Knights of the Cross can really help set that straight, Austin. You know, what are people saying about it who have watched it?
Yeah, we've had some great responses, even from like non-Catholics. I've shared some screeners. The feedback I got is it reminds them of Star Wars. That's kind of the feedback. I go to a cocktail party and say, hey, I watched your episode 1 and I really like it. It kind of reminds me of Star Wars because we did implement a lot of the spiritual aspects of it. You know, we did have purgatory in episode 1, and then episode 2 we did feature the apparition of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So we wanted to bring in the spirituality of it. Now, what does the Our Lady of Mount Carmel and Purgatory have to do with the Crusades? Kind of, they were in the same time period, but we wanted to feature why Richard was fighting and what gave him life. And so, you know, in episode 1, we have Richard who gets on the battlefield and he gets a really bad fever. And then we kind of use some creative freedom. He is in this fever and then he sees his father in purgatory. And when we filmed that scene in purgatory, we were advised by a Latin mass priest who was there, Father Gray. You've seen him on EWTN. He was actually in episode 1. And I was a little concerned because half the cast members were half naked. And I was like, oh man, Father, please look the other way. But he pulled out his holy card. I don't know if Jay Stephen remembers this. He pulled out his holy card
He's a great
and he
priest.
says, no, that's about right. And there had to be what, 30 naked men in the
Well,
studio.
they weren't naked, Austin. They were like they were wearing like kind of like almost like the traditional image of the soul in purgatory, like kind of like these like loincloth type, you know, cloths type things. And it really looked almost like a Renaissance painting of purgatory. It's really interesting imagery, you know, that we achieved with that. So it was a really, and you know, yeah, we had a priest advising on it. And he was a
Brian,
great
you
priest,
took
by
me
the
to
way.
this church, is the Franciscan church in Washington, D.C., where you can walk down the stairs and they have that chapel of the Purgatory. And on the altar there, they have exactly what you guys are describing. They're reaching up through the flames, you know,
Yeah.
bare chested, you know, because all their attachments have been burnt away. You know, Ryan, you've been to the Holy Land. You're an incredibly magnanimous guy. When you were there, you were having coffee with, you know, Muslims and eating with Jews, and you know, you would have been a great crusader, and you would have been written about well. So, you know, Ryan, what is your thoughts on the Crusades? You know, being a guy who's probably, um, well, probably descended from some of them, being a Southern Italian like you are.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think I start my deductions from, you know, current events, civilization, observation. Um, Even now, I think you can sort of back into the understanding that uh, there's going to be imminent contention, right? It's not, I don't know that war or that type of thing will ever be resolved, but you do kind of get a glimpse into what is causing it, right? Whether it's religion, territory, I even think about the social fabric Stephen was talking about when civilizations are in good times or they're prospering. And I mean, how many movies have we seen? How many cultures have we seen uh, that get invaded, that lose battles because they're just soft on the idea of protecting what they have?
Hmm.
Uh, so like that dynamic you see in there. Um, but obviously we've done some shows on this before in different sort of bits and pieces. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Western civilization would look completely different today if this were to be something that um, would overrun the Christian West, right?
Mm-hmm.
It certainly uh, would look that way today, in a sense, where you see social fabrics being, torn, right? Like in Great Britain and Western Europe, even in some cases here. where, you know, the Muslim religion still has, in some factions, still has that idea that, you know, that you have to live this way, right? I mean, it's and the Christian religion does not live that way. The Christian religion invites you into a relationship with Christ. It uh, builds you up to an understanding of what Scripture is and who He is and how to live, and they're all contradictory to the way our world lives, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I look at it kind of, you know, it's definitely a reduction because I don't really I can't read like a history book and put all the pieces together, but I understand a lot of the dynamics, you know, of war and social fabrics and religion, and you can see that this is an inevitable thing, you know,
Yeah.
and it's still not going away, but it's, um, it's something you want to protect people from, you know,
You know,
especially as a man.
Ryan, genetically, and I could probably get canceled for saying this, but I don't know if Islam and Western society are compatible in any way, shape, or form, even from the very beginning. Jesus Christ was an itinerant preacher who preached love and nonviolence. Muhammad was a warlord. Jesus Christ was crucified and went willingly to his slaughter. Muhammad took over lands violently and took Jerusalem violently while Jesus came in on a donkey in humility. They are fundamentally, in so many ways, opposed in the way that they treat God. And you can still see that reverberation throughout the years, all the way until now. And you'll see that in places like Germany and Spain and England or
Mhm,
Dearborn, Michigan, or wherever you have large influx
mhm.
of Islamic culture, is that that creates an estuary where the two just have a real hard time mixing. Now, that being said, during the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, the accounts of how well the Christians and the Muslims lived together is actually pretty startling. They really got
Right.
along fairly well, whether it's through trade, whether it's through art, whether it's through just toleration, because, religion, especially in the ancient and classical world and in the medieval times, really was a force for homogenization in society. It was more than just a personal thing that you kept in your household like we do now. Religion was something that kept a society together. That's why you'll see things like the Frankish kingdom coming about and being Latin Catholics as opposed to, the other kingdoms being Arian, and why the French kingdom continued on while other ones did not. And this is the same thing with Islam. So,
But the
Stephen,
other thing too is like war appeals to men. I mean, why would our boys like watching, you know, these shows, right? These why do my boys love Braveheart? Why do my, you know, and
Yeah.
so I think, you know, there's
good
an
point.
appeal to any young boy or man uh that when, you know, shown this way, whether it's right or wrong, there's still an attraction there. And so obviously we know the Muslim form of religion is, you know, heretical, and it's driven by that, right? It's driven by that where, you know, as men that are Christian, it's like our battle is interior. Our protection is protecting the Holy Spirit in our family, in our neighborhoods, you know, reaching out to people that are vulnerable, not taking advantage of them, and not subjecting them to something that we've found to be, you know, something we can take on, you know, in a
Hmm.
form of a war or a fight.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the root of all human societies is, it's kind of it's the war band. It's like it's the kind of the warrior chieftain and his boys, and you know, yeah, that is kind of the story of, we mentioned the issue of when you have like kind of a decadence take hold in a more advanced city dwelling type society, and how sometimes that can ultimately work against survival and strength. And I do think we kind of, even in the story of Islam itself, Islam early on, it was kind of more uh, a little bit tougher and leaner and meaner. And then, like Islamic Spain, for example, became very opulent. The biggest, wealthiest cities in Spain were these Muslim cities like Cordoba, Sevilla, Valencia. Meanwhile, in the mountainous northwest, where the Christians were hanging out and just like we were saying, like they kind of became the toughest mercenaries. Like the Muslims started hiring Christian mercenaries from the mountainous north to be in their armies, and they didn't have like the fancy cities, but they became the best fighters. And then by the end of the 11th century, they're conquering these Muslim cities where they used to be hired as mercenaries. So that is kind of this sort of story in the human story of weakness can bring a fatal end if you're faced with a tough and warlike opponent.
Yeah, I've heard the idiom. Basically, it's look, barefoot up the stairs and silk sandals down the stairs, right? I mean, and you see that in every society. The Romans, they were tough farmers, just absolutely self-survivalists, and then they get rich and then opulent and they go away. You look at, even Islam, right? I mean, like you said, the reason that the Crusades were so successful at the time they were successful is because, you have the basically Baghdad and Cairo fighting each other. There's not very much unity in the Islamic world. And the Crusades came at just the right time where the Muslims couldn't get it together, where they were a unified front, and the Crusades were able to be successful there. But you can also see that in today's world. I mean, the United States was founded by a bunch of, gun-toting farmers who are chewing tobacco, and they're like, dude, if you even try to put a 1-cent tax on my tea, I will absolutely revolt. Right now, it's like, look, I think you should tax me more so we can give more money to people who aren't citizens of this country, because I don't want to be mean, right? And these are societal illnesses that every society has and every society suffers from, and you see that in the rise and decline of empires and civilizations. God willing, that doesn't happen to the United States or Europe, but it's not looking great, boys. So I think a little Crusader spirit is maybe we still have that spirit inside of us anyway. So now, gentlemen, before we let you go and before we let you do the promotion of the two things you're doing, here's something that we always do on our channel, which is the Inquisition. So we're going to ask you 4 questions. They're pretty easy. And then you guys will both get your chance to answer. And then when you do, you get to tell us about what you're doing and share that with our audience. So, all right. Question number 1. And we'll start with you, Stephen. What's your favorite Bible verse?
Why Does the Heathen Rage? That was the title of my first book. It's from the Psalms.
Austin,
I don't remember.
same question.
I was trying to think of which Psalm it was.
You wrote a book and don't remember the Psalm? How many books have you written?
I wrote it down somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a great verse, though. Yeah.
Austin, same question for you. Favorite Bible verse?
Wow, you caught me off guard. We filmed the same
you can't
thing
ask
with
that.
Yeah,
this is the Inquisition, man. This is the Inquisition. I'm
ask
them out of
Catholics
here.
to name Bible verses. What are you talking about?
You don't have to give me verse and chapter. Give me the sentiment.
Well, I'm reading Proverbs, and I think I wish I would have read Proverbs when I was a teenager, because there's so much wisdom. Had I read that, I would have made so many great decisions out of my life. But yeah, I would just encourage anyone to read Proverbs. If you're into business, an entrepreneur, or just a young man, I think our show attracts a lot of young men. I encourage all your listeners to just read Proverbs, do a Rames version, and really absorb it. You're going to save yourself probably millions of dollars. I'm not kidding. So read Proverbs.
That's good advice. Very good advice. All right. Second question. Favorite church hymn? Stephen, we'll start with you.
Mine is the Mass of the Angels, Gloria, personally.
Austin?
Man, I don't really have a hymn. I just like anything. When I go to the Latin Mass, I just like anything that they're singing, the choir sing, and just sounds so beautiful. So anything Latin Mass related, I'm a big fan.
All right. We'll go to you out first on this question, Austin. Favorite saint?
Well, I would have to say St. Augustine, because I identify him with a lot. God is good. And I feel like if he could make St. Augustine a great saint, um, I think there's a lot of hope for all of us out there, all of us young men to change our lives around.
I'm flattered that you call us young men. Steven, favorite saint?
Well, I'm hoping she'll be canonized. Queen Isabel I of Spain. I think she's blessed right now, but since she's not yet canonized, I'll go with one of her ancestors, Saint Fernando of Leon Castile,
Mm-hmm.
a great crusading king.
Yep. Very good. And then finally, Austin, if you were elected Pope, what name would you choose?
Pope Leo beat me.
Okay. Well, you could be Leo the 15th.
Pick that one.
Or you could be Leo the 15th. Stephen, what about you?
Gosh, that's a tough one. There's a lot of popes I really like, but this name kind of gets a bad rap because of Alexander VI, but Alexander II is one of my favorite popes, and I like that name, so I might go with that one. But I also might go with Urban, just because Pope Urban II.
Yeah, I figured you might go Urban, but Alexander's a strong choice too.
There's a lot of great popes from that period, so especially like
really
the late 11th century.
Yeah. All right, well, Ryan, I think they passed. I'm
glad I didn't get those questions.
But you're going to get to one day. The second you want to promote something, Ryan.
The Bible verse one, I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
I grew up right in the heart of the Bible Belt, so I got that all the. You Catholics don't know your Bible.
All right, so why don't we do this then? Since you guys survived the Inquisition, you've been exonerated. Torquemada says you are not guilty, and you guys are able to pass. So,
thank you,
Stephen. Why don't you, tell us a little bit about the channel that you run on YouTube, Real Crusades History.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of been a lifelong labor of love. I love doing it. It's all about medieval topics. It started out as just the Crusades. It has branched out a bit, although it stays pretty close to that theme. But yeah, Real Crusades History on YouTube. You can check it out. There's all kinds of stuff on there. Some people use it for homeschooling. We were talking about that in the pre-show. But yeah, it's just it's the medieval world, and I really do try to focus on these personalities and getting something of the virtue and the heroism, and telling these real stories. That there's so much there that is often overlooked, and it's in the history. It's just in the history itself. It's not like you have to create fan fiction or something for it, but the history itself is often so great. So yeah, Real Crusades History, and Knights of the Cross has been a fun project too. So I'll let Austin kind of talk about that a little more.
Yeah, Knights of the Cross. It's a 5-year in the making TV miniseries. It was 100% supported by fans that are listening right now, and it's still crowdfunding at christianchannel.com. So the cool thing about this project is, it's like I said, Hollywood didn't really touch it. It was kind of like our own, production. It really was. And it's very cinematic. So the whole goal of the show is just to catechize Catholics, and Christians, just to kind of understand our faith a little more. A little reason why we created this show is because I'm from Los Angeles. We're currently recording in Los Angeles, where I'm at. And, 5 years ago, the world was crazy. They were tearing down statues of Junipero Serra. They made every excuse to attack Christians. And, my history working with celebrities, I knew it was all driven by the media. And I really, when our mission, the San Gabriel mission, caught on fire, that's when I started the Christian channel, because at the time you come home from a long day's of work, there's a show called Lucifer, there's witches. So we're just getting bombarded by hatred of Christianity. And that's why, through the graces of God, we were able to raise funds to finish a show about the Crusades. Why the Crusades? Because men really need to know their history. And I think Jay is doing a great job with it. But my battlefront of it, the battlefront that we face today is in the culture and it's in the media. So the great news is, when you support projects like this, just to tell you, your audience out there, we have opportunities to be on HBO, opportunities to be on Hulu, Peacock. The studios want us, but it takes an independent, ragtag, rough country bumpkin Christians that get together, that donate or crowdfund $100 here and there. And if we had 1,000 of you guys doing it, man, this show would have been done years ago. But the thing is, we're here now. The release date is going to be December 28th of 2025. And then in 26, we're going to do our best to try to be on the major streamers. But this is how we change a culture is all of us mission driven, not prideful driven, but just mission driven to point people to Christ and tell them the truth.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, if you're watching this, go out to the Christian channel and support this. Now, go and definitely subscribe to Real Crusades History. There's one video I'm going to recommend on there. It's the first, second, and third Crusades mega compilation. It's 5 hours long. It's awesome. Go and listen to that. Go listen to that. I listened to that. It took me about 3 days to get through the whole thing, in spurts. Absolutely amazing. But I watched that, a year ago before I even knew who you were, Stephen. So it's a really, really great way to get an introduction to real history of the Crusades, and then go support Knights of the Cross. This program can be, like The Chosen. It could be a viral hit. It could be something that through the real support of people out there of goodwill who want real good stories of faith and truth to be shared, support it. This is something that can go really big, and it's a really well done series. I've seen that, and I really enjoy it. So go out and support that. Now, before we go, also, this is the first time we're telling anybody, Ryan, and I think it's a great time, right? It's not going to be an armed pilgrimage, but we are going on pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 2026. So that's going to be June 10th through the 20th. And you can find out more at CatholicTalkShow.com/Holy Land. We're going to go to all the major sites. You can go to the website and see the full itinerary. This was the trip we were intending to take a couple years ago, but then because of the conflict, we had to cancel it. Now that there's the truce in place and that it's safe to travel again, we are going to take this trip of a lifetime. We're going to go to Nazareth and Bethlehem and the Sea of Galilee. We're going to go to Jerusalem and see the site where Christ was born, where the site where he was crucified, died, and resurrected. We're going to see so many amazing sites. We're going to also have an extension into Jordan to see Petra and Mount Nebo and float in the Dead Sea and go through the Galilee. This is going to be an incredibly in-demand trip, because this is one of the first trips being announced back to the Holy Land. Everyone's been wanting to go, and now's the time to do it. And we can't wait to go with you. So again, go to CatholicTalkShow.com/Holy Land. Gentlemen, I could talk to you guys for hours about the Crusades. I don't know if YouTube and our audience can handle it, but I could talk for probably days if you wanted to talk about the Crusades. So we'd love to have you back on anytime if we want to get into some more specific topics.
Yeah, it's great having you guys on the show. So go check everything out we've been discussing, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for joining our show today.